Hey guys, Toby Mathis here, and today we're going to talk about 1099s, what they are, who has to send them, what are the nasty penalties if you don't, what are all the good, the bad, and the ugly of 1099s. So we're going to dive right on in. Number one, businesses send out 1099s. Individuals don't. So if you're just individual and you're going through about your life, don't have to worry about this so much. If you are an investor or you're a business, then you absolutely have to worry about 1099s, and they come in different flavors. You might have a 1099 NEC, which is non-employee compensation. That's the vast majority of the 1099s for a business, but you might also have a 1099 INT, which means you paid somebody interest. For interest, it's an amount over $10. If it's non-employee compensation, it's for amounts over $600. So just kind of throw those two things out at you. Let's back up though for a second. What is a 1099? Why do we even have them? It lets the IRS know who should be responsible for paying taxes on income. In other words, if I receive $1,000 and I pay somebody else $700, the IRS needs to be able to see that and see who's ultimately responsible and make sure that they're reporting that income. So a 1099 is an informational return. So, for example, as a business, I may be receiving monies all the time from third parties. If I am receiving that, they may 1099, letting the IRS know, because they might be a business too, and they might be 1099ing me to report that income, so I see it. So, for example, if you're a gig worker, you're probably getting 1099s. If you're using things like PayPal and getting payments online, there's a whole bunch of them. There's Venmo, PayPal, or some of those, or credit card processing. They're going to 1099 you. If you use something like Zelle, no, because that's bank to bank, they're not going to 1099 you. But if you're receiving payments on through like a PayPal, that's the beautiful part. PayPal is going to 1099 the party that you paid out. They're going to make sure that that they're issuing that out if you're using the PayPal on a business account for transactions marked as business. They're going to be the ones issuing out the 1099s. It makes your life a little bit easier. But if you are going out there and you are paying, let's just pretend that you're just paying a bunch of contractors. We're just going to call them contractors to make it really simple. But you're paying other parties, or I'm paying LLCs. I'm paying sole proprietors. I'm paying anybody that, and I'm paying them more than $600 for non-employee compensation. In other words, they're coming out to one of my properties and they do $2,000 of work. I'm probably going to have to 1099 them. The only time I don't is if they are an S Corp or a C Corp or an LLC taxed as an S Corp or a C Corp. So here's our first major point on 1099s. Make sure that you are getting something called a W-9. I'm going to flash it up on screen here so that you could actually see it. A W-9 is actually very, very simple. You can see it. This is the totality of it. They're signing off. Here's my tax identification number if it's a business. Here's how I'm taxed. And if they go up here in their either category here, C or S Corp, or an LLC, and it says S or C down here, hopefully you can see my little cursor there, you don't have to 1099 them. You can be paying those folks thousands of dollars. You don't have to 1099 them. But if they fall in the individual or sole proprietor, partnership, trust or estate, or if they're a limited liability company and you see partnership, or the other ones if it's disregarded, which would be up above, but if you see P there, you're going to end up 1099ing them. And if you're in doubt, 1099 it out. Just make sure you're reporting it, because all that happens is you're saying, hey, I may have received this money, but I'm not the one who's ultimately responsible for the taxes on it. So let me go through this again. I'm gonna K through 12 it, I guess is how you call it. Businesses are required to issue 1099s to any taxpayer other than a corporation or an LLC taxed as a corporation who has received at least $600 of non-employment income during the tax year. In other words, you don't have to give 1099s to your employees because you're W-2ing them. You're already reporting it to them. For example, a taxpayer might receive a 1099 form if they received, in other words, I'm going to receive it from the party that paid me. If I receive dividends or cash payments made to an investor, things like that. If I have property managers, I'm probably going to receive a 1099, right? Because they're going to say, hey, even though they received the money from the tenants, who do they end up paying it to? You're doing this even if you have a management entity that's receiving all of your rents on behalf of, let's say you had 10 LLCs and you're collecting it through your own property management company. You're issuing out 1099s to all of those LLCs. You want to make sure that we're reporting it in the right place because that's a different taxpayer. It's going to end up on a different tax return. So let's talk about the exceptions. When do you not have to do 1099s? And there are. We already talked about the corporation, S&C, or an LLC taxed as an S or a C. So the rule of thumb is before you write somebody a check that's going to be more than $600, or if you're going to continuously be paying them an amount over the year, and it's business, you want to be able to write this off, right? Make sure you get that W-9 because it forces them to tell you exactly how they are taxed. It keeps you out of trouble. So you do not have to file a 1099 if you are paying a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC taxed as a C Corp or an S Corp. There's a couple of little situations where that's not the case. That's if it's medical or healthcare or even attorney services. And when I say attorney services, I mean like legal services. You're paying somebody by the hour or you're paying a firm. Those are the kind of the exceptions to that one rule. If you are paying for physical goods, not services, you do not have to issue a 1099. That was a huge issue because Congress originally said you had to. And then they had enough uproar of people saying, are you kidding me? I'm not going to send a 1099 to Home Depot, you crazies. Right? So it's only for services. It is not for goods. If you run across people that you're paying and they're an LLC and they say, hey, don't worry, I'm an LLC. You don't have to give me a 1099. Make sure you get that W-9. I'm just going to say that because I've seen it blow back on folks. You have two types of penalties that could come up. Number one is if you are late. Hey, I don't issue a 1099. You got to do this by January 31st. So what you do is you look at your books or you talk to your bookkeeper and say, is there anybody that I paid more than $600 to? Do I have a W-9? Are they an S or a C Corp? Does it follow in one of those categories of health or law? I want to issue them a 1099. That's what you're looking for. If you do not, and you let's say that you missed the deadline, it's January 31st, and you're like, oh, nuts, I should have done this and I forgot to. If you're within 30 days, it's a $50 penalty. If you do it within February 1st to August 1st, it's $110 penalty for 2022. If you just don't do it ever, you could be looking at an intentional disregard penalty of up to $570. If you do it, if you just forget to file and you have reasonable, you just didn't know, or you just forgot, it was oversight and you have reasonable cause, which is most people, it's going to be $280 if they catch you. And they say, hey, if you went through an audit, very unlikely that you're ever going to go through that. But why tempt fate? Just issue the 1099s. They're fairly easy to do. They're just a little form. You send them on out to that party that you paid the monies to. Like, if in doubt, send it out. It doesn't hurt anybody. Just like if you were doing a gig work and you made $2,000 or $3,000 on the side, you would expect to get some sort of tax document saying, here's how much they paid you, right? And then that's what you're including on your tax return. So if you're a sole proprietor out there, for example, or you're out there running in a partnership and you're doing some business on the side, and you're not an S Corp, you would expect to see a 1099. If you are an S Corp, which you probably should be, if you're doing gig work, depending on how much you're making, you want to make sure you're doing that W-9 and giving them that W-9 so that they don't give you the 1099. You still report it. But even if you were the S Corp and they gave you the 1099, you don't care because you're reporting it anyway. So rule of thumbs here. Remember, we're going to keep going through this. Your business, you're paying somebody over $600. Make sure that you're getting that W-9 and you're giving them a 1099. Before you write a check to anybody, if you expect that the amount that you're going to pay them over the year is going to be over $600, make sure you're getting that W-9 before you write the check. It's sometimes tough to get them to react and to respond to you if it's after the fact. Here's another little thing. If you have a corporation with an off year end, maybe it has a year end that's September, or maybe you have a year end that's March or June, 1099s are on a calendar system, so it doesn't matter. You are filing your 1099s by January 31st and for the year that ends December 31st. It doesn't matter what your fiscal year end of your company is. Everybody's doing 1099s at the same time. Now, there are 1099s that do not have that $600 limit, and the two big ones are retirement distributions. So if you get a 1099-R from your on an IRA, if you took out money early, or if you were paying, if you paid interest, you would 1099. If you paid interest, you'd receive the 1099. If somebody was paying you interest, you'd 1099 them if it's over $10. Last thing is, realistically, if you get into a snafu with somebody, and let's say you don't have a W-9 and you're like, I really ought to file that 1099, I would say, you're probably better off not, because you could have withholding, depending on how much it is. So here's what I have seen. I've seen people issue 1099s without the Social Security number on it, and then they treat it as though you were required to do withholding on an employee. And the IRS takes the position that you owe, I think it was 28% withholding. So you're better off not doing it. So if you paid somebody and you know that they're a contractor and you did get that W-9, the intentional disregard is actually a lesser amount than the withholding. And if you just didn't do it, hopefully you never have to deal with it anyway. So always get that 1099. Always make sure that anybody that you're paying over $600, make sure that you file the 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation, is January 31st. There is a 1099 miscellaneous for like prize money or some off items. It's kind of a catch-all. And that one's actually March 31st, so it's a little bit different. Remember that if you're paying a corporation via a credit card or whatnot, the merchant company is going to be sending them the 1099. You don't have to. So that's another good reason to use credit cards. But if you're paying somebody checks, cash, whatever, make sure you're 1099. But if you paid them via a credit card, the credit card company is going to issue the 1099. Then also the same rule applies to Venmo and PayPal. They generally issue a 1099-K to the business accounts for the transactions that are marked at business, so it's going to be reported to the IRS, which alleviates the responsibility of you having to do it. So again, it's almost like they're pushing us away from writing checks, right? Because you have a little more compliance with the check. It's almost like they want us to use the credit cards, the evil MasterCards and Visas of the world, the PayPals and the Venmos. But that's one of the benefits, is that because you're using one of those platforms, it takes a little bit of the risk off of you. All right, that is it. 1099s. It's an informational reporting return that businesses file for non-employee compensation paid to third parties. It's basically saying, hey, money was paid out here and it's taxed over there, and it's letting the IRS know where to look. For the most part, you're looking at a January 31st deadline. So for the 1099 NEC, that's the deadline. For everything else, I would still get it to the recipient by January 31st. You might have a later deadline before you are late, but make sure that you're actually getting it out. I would just say January 31st is your date. Get your 1099s out. Make it simple. Make it easy. And remember, the rule of thumb is before you write a check, get that W-9 to make sure that you know exactly whether you should be issuing that 1099 or not.